Hey guys, it's AJ from Design the Everything. So I'm having a hard time finding time to do some bigger projects that actually involve making stuff. So I think for the next couple weeks, just so I'm still producing content for you guys, I'm going to work on just doing some quicker tutorials that I can wrap up easily. For example, right now I have 35 minutes to get this done before I have to head to work. So um, this tutorial, I'm going to talk about how to use this little sketch palette box here in Fusion 360. These constraints right here are super handy. Now you can do a lot of this stuff manually and using just the dimensioning commands. These constraints work particularly well at making your model easy to go back and edit. So for example, if you're doing prototyping, you're working on a product, you finish your first iteration and you want to just make some slight tweaks to it, you don't have to go back and redo your whole model or cause a ton of errors. Using these commands will just let you go back and quickly make changes. I recommend using these geometric constraints as much as possible and avoiding the like the dimension constraints, like a set distance, unless you absolutely need to use them. So I'm just going to go through these one by one. So I'm going to start by showing you the coincidence constraint. So I'm going to make a line here. I clicked on the line tool. There's one line. I'm going to hit the check mark. And now I'm going to do another line, 90 degrees to it, and hit enter. All right, so let's say I wanted those to line up. This is what the coincidence constraint is for. So all I have to do is click on that, and then click on one point, and then the other point. And now Fusion knows that those points will always be stuck together. And it still lets you move things around and doesn't break things. This can also be used to put a circle, for example, on an endpoint. So if I make a circle here, I can hit coincidence and coincidence, click on that center point, and coincidence the circle to that endpoint. Very handy. Now I can still resize that, I can still move it around, and Fusion knows where it'll be. Now sometimes Fusion assumes what constraints you want to do. So for example, if I put another circle here and click off of it, that circle will be at that point and I can have all the same freedoms, but Fusion made that constraint for me. If you want Fusion to not make constraints as you go, then if you hold down the control button when you place your shape, for example, that circle, it won't have made that constraint and you will be able to move them separately. So again, hold down control and Fusion will not assume constraints for you. All right, so let's delete those and do some more. So the next one is collinearity. Collinearity is used to make lines line up. So for a good use case for this is if you have two rectangles and you always want the tops to be equal to each other, to be on the same level. If you click on the collinearity button, click on the top line there and the top line there. And now as we can move the bottom separately, but if we move the tops, it will keep them on the same line. Now, if you wanted to go back and delete this constraint, you can see all of your constraints here show up as symbols. And these symbols should match the ones over here. So this right here is the collinearity constraint. If we click on that and delete it, now we can move them separately. And it also, remember here, it shows up the constraints that Fusion 360 assumes. And if you want to get rid of those assumptions, for example, this top line being vertical, you can do that. And now that'll let us rotate it. This is the concentricity constraint. So if you have two circles and you want one circle to be right inside the other circle, just hit the concentric, click on one circle, click on the other circle, and now that circle, the center points of those circles will always line up. And this also works on arcs. So we come up here and do an arc. There we go. And then do a circle. We can use the concentricity to make that arc go around the circle. Again, that's center point to center point. No matter how we move it or change the size, that will always be true. Next is the midpoint constraint. This is one of my favorite ones. I use this quite a bit. So if you have, let's say, a rectangle, and you wanted a line going straight down the center, all you have to do is make a line. There we go. And we can use the midpoint constraint, which looks like a triangle is the symbol for it, and click there, and then click on that line, and that'll put that in the center. You can do the same thing on the other side. I use this a lot when I am cutting something in half to revolve it. So if I wanted to revolve that shape, I would have done that and then hit T for trim and just trimmed off all those other line sections. And then I know I have exactly half of it. So let's say we've just done this and we're trying to reshape it, but we want the center point of the rectangle, the one we made when we made the rectangle by center, we want that to stay in the same place. There is a command for that. So I'm gonna hit undo until this is back how it was. I can click on this point here and then click the fix button. And that means that you see how that point turned green? There you go, green. That means it will not be able to move. So we can move all of this stuff, but that point will stay there no matter what. And if we wanted to do that to a line too, we could do it to a line, and now that line will never move. Now it will get longer and shorter, but it's going to stay at the same angle with that fixed endpoint. If we wanted to lock that line down completely, we could fix that, and now that's not going to move at all, except that way. There we go, because that doesn't affect the line. I highly recommend staying away from this fix unfix tool. I recommend that you don't use this fix tool. Despite its name, it'll actually break the editability on a lot of your models, because what you're actually doing is telling Fusion not to edit that part. And if you want to go back and make changes and you have a part that you can't edit, well, then it's going to be hard to edit. Another useful command is the parallel command. So if you're doing something like making a rectangle, it actually assumes that you want the edges to be parallel. So notice here, it fills in these little parallel constraints. You can delete those and make your rectangle into not a rectangle. And of course, you can make your own if you have, let's say, a line and you want to make a line parallel to another one. Now those will always be parallel. You can still move it around that way, however you want, but you won't be able to change the angle on it. And if you do change the angle on one, it'll change the angle on everything. Perpendicular works exactly the same way, just opposite. So if we delete this parallel constraint, we can go perpendicular and make a line perpendicular to a line. Handy. Horizontal and vertical is another really useful command. Now notice here, if you make a different kind of rectangle, a rectangle by 2 points, it will fill these in. And that means no matter what you do, you cannot make that line not vertical. So if you do a line here, I can come over here and it'll make that horizontal. Now it does assume which way you want to do it, if it wants to be horizontal or vertical. So if you try to make it close before you hit the button. If you're trying to make a line that's almost vertical horizontal with that button, you have to first make it horizontal and then press the horizontal button. The next button is tangent. Now this is also super useful. So if you have a line and a circle, you can make the circle tangent to the line, or the line tangent to the circle. And this is very useful. So let's say you have 2 lines here. Okay, so see how that's going in the circle? We can make that tangent. There we go. And then we can even trim away these extra lines. And now notice we have that these will meet up perfectly. It's nice and smooth all the way around, and we just have a circle on the end of our triangle here. This works well for arcs too. So if you are, well, let's say you don't know about this fillet tool here, and you want a smooth circle going between these. You can just make a circle. I hit C for circle there, and just tangent them on, and then hit T for trim, and trim away whatever you don't need. And that'll make that nice and continuous there. So going down here to smooth, if you have, let's say, a spline, and you can make a line there. If you try to make the line smooth to the spline, it won't work. It won't let you. Unless these points here, that point and that point, are coincidenced. So if we do that, we can coincidence them and use the smooth command. Now, where the spline hits that line, their radiuses of curvature will be the same. So, aka on the spline right here at the endpoint, it's going to have a 0 radius of curvature. So if you look, that'll be nice and smooth. That is, I believe, G1 continuity, for those of you who know what that is. If you don't worry about it. It's not important. But that smoothness means that when you 3D print or machine this part, it'll look better, and it'll be easier to machine and faster to machine. So that smooth command also works if you have two splines. So if we do another spline here, and we want them to sync up well, so if I draw another spline here, I cannot tangent them, as you can see, and the smooth command doesn't work, again, unless they are touching. So now I can tangent them, and that lines up the curves as if they were a circle. And then if I undo that, I can also make them smooth. There we go, which means that, again, right there at that point, the rate of curvature on this side is the same as the rate of curvature on that side. That's essentially the same thing as, like, this is now acts as one spline as it goes. I just combine those two splines into one spline. So I'm going to delete those, and now let's talk about the last two, equal and symmetry. So let's say you have a rectangle here, and I'm going to make a circle. And now I'm going to do a line right through there and a line through there. Actually, I want this going through the diameter. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit coincidence this to the diameter. That to the diameter. There we go. And let's say we want, let's say we want the circle and the rectangle to be the same size. So I'm actually going to go ahead and click on both of those and make those construction, which means that they're just there for reference. They don't actually show up in the final model. And now I can click equal and click one of those lines and then the other line. And now, as I move this, here, I'm going to, remember when I told you not to fix things? I'm going to fix these. Fix. And I'm going to fix that. There you go. So now, as I change the length of that line, it changes the circle, and I can do that the other way around too. So now those will always be equal. I tend to not use this command as much. I actually do this one through formulas. So if you watched my adaptive modeling video, that's how I would do that. But just to show you, I would normally click on that line, hit enter, click on this line, and then when this is highlighted, just click on this and hit enter, and that accomplishes the same thing. So, I can't resize it manually because I put a dimension on it. So if I change this one to 25, it changes that one too. Now, one of the differences though is this is not reversible. So if I change this one, it will not change that one. But normally you don't want them. You don't normally want that. You normally want one thing to define the other. And symmetry. So I'm going to delete those and come up here and make a line there. Then I'm going to make a construction line. So I'm going to use the line tool to make a triangle. I just hit L for line. There we go. And notice how that's a little bit asymmetrical. We can exaggerate that. If we want to make this triangle symmetrical, all you have to do is click on symmetry, click on the first line you want symmetrical, the second line you want symmetrical, and then the line of symmetry, which in this case will be the middle. It pops up these symbols here. And now you can adjust this. You could also do this through a mirror pattern, but this works too. So now if you come up here, there's some checkboxes I haven't talked about yet. These are just options. If you change the angle and hit the look at button, it'll bring you looking straight back down on it like you're right over it. You can turn on and off snapping to the grid here. And the slice, if you are working in the middle of a three-dimensional part, here, I'll show you. I'll extrude this out. And let's make a plane, an offset plane somewhere in the middle here. And we will do another sketch on there. So I'm just going to do a circle on that plane. If part of your geometry is hidden by this, if you hit this slice it'll cut that in between. So if you have like some inside geometry, you can now do a sketch on the inside, and that just makes it easier to see. So I'm going to get out of that. There we go. And go back to my original sketch. Now, if you notice, this here is a little bit of a salmon color. If you click Show Profile, that goes away. This just shows you that this is a closed manifold profile, which will work for extruding. Show Points is pretty obvious, and as is Show Constraints. If you click on Show Constraints, all of those will disappear, come back. If you can't find them and you're trying to delete one, like one of those, just open up your sketch palette here and click on Show Constraint. You can see it. Now, I will get into this 3D sketch constraint later. I'm going to do another video where I use more of the 3D sketches. But there's an option for that too. Now, of course, the last option is there's a Stop Sketch button. Oh, probably underneath my head here. There's a Stop Sketch button right here, or there's this Stop Sketch button. So that's the sketch palette. I hope that helps you guys. I'm sure some of you that have used some of the other CAD programs before, like SolidWorks or CATIA or even Inventor, are very much familiar with those. But I know that some of you new guys coming into Fusion from something like SketchUp are not familiar. Highly encourage you to use those constraints, as they make going back and editing your models much more efficient. If you have any other questions, don't be afraid to ask in the comment section below. I will either get back to you just in text there as a comment as soon as I can, or I'll go ahead and make a video for you. Especially right now, since I'm a little bit busier, I may not be as fast on the turnaround time for that video, but I can probably get it to you within a week, if not just a couple of days. If I'm not actually 3D printing something or doing something on my router, then these videos are much quicker to create, which is why I'm going to go this route with tutorials for at least the next couple of weeks until I get time. So I can get them to you pretty quick. If you like this video, please hit the like button. That boosts my ratings for YouTube. It helps other people to find me. So I can hopefully help them out too. And if you want to see the rest of my tutorials and videos as they come out, especially when I get back into some of the more exciting project videos, then please hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.